The 483rd edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year, the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome in to another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony back with you guys once again tonight. 5 hours or so after Carolina registered what's now officially their first bad loss of the year. They fall at home to Stanford 72-71 in the Smith Center, and we're here to talk about everything from that game. We'll go through the box score. I'll read you my quote from Hubert Davis. We'll give you the stat of the game, more thoughts, more takeaways, and a score, and of course, a discussion topic that's I think going to be a lively one. I'll go ahead and just kind of set the scene by saying this. When this team loses, I think we have a reputation of people want to come and hear us yell. People want to come and hear us vent. People want to hear us come and blame the coach. I've been very reluctant to do the last one. I've yelled, I've complained, I've vented, but I haven't gone in on Hubert Davis and blamed him for a result. You're going to get that today. So if you're an anti-Hubert Davis fan, congratulations, because you're about to hear me complain about him over the next hour. If you're a guy like me that doesn't like complaining about Hubert Davis, then bear with me, because I don't love having to do what I have to do today. But after being in the arena and seeing what happened transpired, I just felt convicted that, as much as we talk about the players not executing, I thought Hubert Davis was thoroughly outcoached in the final 5.5 minutes or so of the ball game, and we're going to talk about that and so much more. So Carolina loses 72-71. Jalen Blakes hits a jump shot with 1.5 seconds to go after Carolina took the lead 71-70 on a pair of 2 free throws made by Seth Trimble. He was able to get down the court and get off a clean look in about 6 seconds, even though Carolina had picked up out of the timeout their full court pressure. But like we saw in the game against Notre Dame, they allowed someone to get to the rim, get a good look at the basket. Marcus Burton missed the shot for the Fighting Irish. Jalen Blakes, now this was a jump shot, not a layup, but he did not miss the shot, and it propelled Stanford to the win. In the process, Carolina's 4-game losing streak has come to an end. It's the first home loss since when leading at the half, since they lost to Duke back during the 2020 season. And it's the first ever loss to Stanford. Carolina entered the game 13-0 all-time against the Cardinal. And the biggest thing, we'll talk about Maxime Reynaud being a big-time player. He was a baller. He had a 25-point, 13-rebound double-double. The biggest issue is that, like against Kansas, like against Michigan State, like against Florida, This game was there for Carolina to determine the outcome. This game was there for Carolina to close the game out. They led by 3 with 3 minutes to go, and they failed to close the game out. And I think that's now when you have 4 of your 7 losses have now come at a point where at the under 4 timeout, you have a lead that you should be able to close the game out, and you don't. This is a trend with this year's team. This is a theme with this year's team. And I'm not going to sit here and say that today's loss wipes away all the work they've done over the last 2 weeks during the 4-game winning streak, but it does just a little bit kind of make you take a step back and say, well, were all those people right that this team was beating a bunch of nobodies? And should we have really examined those close losses a little bit further? Because Carolina had a 92.5% chance to win the game today. And even if we thought the game was going to be close, them getting beaten, I never thought it entered our minds, but that's exactly what happened earlier this afternoon in Chapel Hill.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to say it never entered my mind. I will say that after the way that Stanford performed against Wake Forest, certainly was a little bit easier to look at this game and think somehow Carolina would emerge from this one. I thought along the way this was going to be a really close game because this is a trend now with Carolina that, yes, the games in the middle of the week, Carolina has looked really good. The games on the weekends, Carolina has had to find ways to win based off of miracles. I mean, you go back to the Notre Dame game, Carolina hits a 4-point play in order to get out of there with a win. The NC State game, Carolina blocks a shot at the buzzer to be able to hold on and win. And this was another game where it felt like with 7.7 seconds to go, maybe Seth Trimble had just given you that moment by getting to the free throw line and knocking down both shots. And then, Carolina allows them to get the inbounds. And very similar to the game against Notre Dame, Carolina, for some reason, Seth Trimble backs all the way down into the paint, giving Jalen Blake's as much real estate as possible and allows him to get a clean shot off. Does this eliminate everything that Carolina has done? I don't know. Hard to say that, it would feel like. But I mean, yeah, this takes a lot of wind out of the sails because this is a loss that right now is quad 3, and I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. I don't think this is going to end up being a quad 2 loss. And so a quad 3 loss is incredibly damaging. Now it once again sets up a scenario where you've got to win on the road at Pittsburgh. You've got to win on the road at Clemson. One of those two is it's got to be a victory. Either that or you have to beat Duke, which, I mean, I think we're seeing a path that is possible for Carolina to do it. Now, they're going to need more than what they got today from Ian Jackson, who had an off game. But, I mean, this was a game that you were just hoping. Find a way to get out of there with a victory, like they've been doing. And for some reason, they could not find that today. And this one stings, man, because we have no idea. Now you are putting this in the hands of Stanford, and you're hoping that they can find a way to turn their season in the right direction and finish top half of the ACC. If they do, not necessarily a bad loss that could potentially keep you out of the tournament. If this is a team that falls, to being an average team, or God forbid a below average team in the ACC, that's when you're talking about trouble.
Yeah, I think, we're going to focus on today. The tournament talk, it's not that it's not too early. This isn't a loss that I think. I mean, Carolina was so securely in the field entering today's action. This loss doesn't take them out of the field, and it shouldn't, because it's just one bad loss. They're 5-7, I think, in quad 1, quad 2. You want to be better in those 2 quads, but you have built up some equity to have a bad loss. And I'll say this very plainly. The metrics, like with what you saw with Stanford, aren't representative of what Stanford is. Stanford's better than a team that's 85th in the net. Stanford's better than a team that's 92nd in KenPom. But When you look at this loss today, I think it was really a combination of two things that this team just not going to have a whole lot of answers for if these things go wrong. One, we talked about this being a litmus test for Carolina, and I thought Van Lubin did a tremendous job with Renaud. I thought he made him work. I thought he made him uncomfortable. I thought he did a good job pushing him off his spots, making him have to be more of a perimeter guy, as opposed to getting great low post position and scoring. But when a guy has 25 and 13, that's just too much for Carolina as currently constructed to overcome. And then Ian Jackson has his first bad game, which, mind you, it took this deep into the year for him to have a bad game in his current role. And even though RJ Davis was fine, 19 points, 5 assists, 3 rebounds, there just wasn't enough scoring punch to help Carolina. And when you're relying on a 18-year-old freshman, it's going to happen. Like at some point, he wasn't going to score 20 points in a game. At some point, he was going to look like a freshman and not shoot the ball as efficiently as he has. And Carolina today just did not get enough help from their complementary players or their role players to push them over the top. And I think that's frustrating because, I think we feel pretty comfortable and confident in a guy like Seth Trimble, who I thought today was passive. There were too many times I thought he passed up open perimeter looks and wasn't as aggressive getting to the rim because I thought when he put his head down and drove the ball, Stanford had a really hard time containing him on the dribble drive. But again, this is still a team offensively, as explosive as they can be, is adjusting to playing through a freshman. And these guys, especially Trimble, a guy that's been relegated to the bench, they're still trying to figure out when it's their time for it to be their time. And that's one of the downsides of this shift happening at the end of non-conference season into conference play. But we also looked at the schedule and said, okay, this is the time to do it because you should have been stacking wins. And Carolina had been doing that up until today as they fell at home to Stanford 72-71. Let's take a look at the box score. Both teams shoot 43% from the field. It was not a pretty game by any means. Carolina, 23 of 54. Stanford was 26 of 60. Both teams struggled from behind the three-point line. Carolina, 5 of 18 from 3. That works its way out to 28%. Stanford, on the other hand, was 7 of 22 from behind the three-point line. Both teams efficient from the foul line. Carolina got there 24 times. They were 20 of 24 for 83%. Stanford was 13 of 14. They shot 93% from the foul line. Both teams took care of the basketball. 5 turnovers for Carolina. Their fewest in a loss since they turned it over. I think it was 5 times in a loss at Duke in 2017. But Stanford did score 11 points off of those turnovers. On the other hand, Carolina forced 8 turnovers, but only scored 8 points off of them. Stanford won the rebounding battle 32-31. Carolina won the defensive boards 26-25. Stanford won the offensive boards 7-5. And they won the second chance points battle 10-9. Carolina's bench, headlined by Van Lubin, outscored Stanford's bench 23-1. Carolina outscored Stanford in the paint 30-24. Outscored them in the fast break as well, 11-6. Carolina had 14 assists on 23 made baskets. Stanford had 15 assists on 26 made baskets. The game was tied 12 times. There were 14 lead changes, but yet Carolina still led for 24 minutes and 53 seconds. Let's now get to our quote of the game from head coach Hubert Davis. I'll read it for you guys really quick, then we'll react to it. That quote goes as follows, quote, "I feel like today wasn't one thing. I felt like there were a number of little details or mistakes that we made throughout the entire game," end quote. I don't think he's wrong. And I wrote this in the article. You can check it out at HeelToughBlog.com. The numbers would suggest Carolina played a good defensive game. You hold a team to 43% shooting, 32% shooting from the foul line or from on the three-point line. You didn't get killed on the offensive glass. You didn't get killed on second chance points. But it felt like what Carolina had done the last 4 games, where they were holding teams to 38% shooting from the field, 25% from behind the three-point line. That same level of intensity I don't think was there today. And we'll talk about some of the offensive stuff that played a role in today's loss. But I thought it all started and ended with Carolina on the defensive end. I thought that, Jalen Blakes and Isaiah Sellers, two guys that we said, hey, going in, if they beat us, they beat us. And Blakes literally did that. But Carolina made it too easy on those guys. I thought, the ball pressure was down. I never thought that we were really in their hip pocket. I never felt like we contested them. I never felt like we made them expand their offense 30, 35 feet away from the basket. And it just felt to me that even though Stanford didn't shoot the ball well, I never felt like we took them out of what they wanted to do. And that's something that Carolina had done in the winning streak, was that they were just able to take teams out of what they wanted and really make them start playing one-on-one basketball. That wasn't the case today. And I think that's one of the things that really played a role in the loss. But, and maybe he said it behind closed doors, this is a loss where I feel like you want to hear your head coach take some accountability and take some blame, because he better feel that he lost his team the game. His end-of-game management today was as poor as it's been in any game, quite literally, he's coached in his 3.5, now going on 4 years at Carolina. And we're talking about a coach that was on the sidelines for a team that blew a 15-point lead in the national title game. We're talking about a coach that was on the sidelines with what happened in the Bama loss last year in the NCAA tournament. Kyle Smith is a good head coach, quality head coach. You don't win at Washington State by being a bum. You got to roll your sleeves up and you got to go to work. And that's what he did last year, leading that team to the tournament. But the head coach at Stanford should never, ever outcoach the head coach at the University of North Carolina. And that's quite simply what happened this afternoon. I thought Kyle Smith had a better feel for the game, was quick to use his timeouts when Carolina would have just a 4-0 run. I thought him changing defenses and giving Carolina that zone look was brilliant. It's why I may not believe in playing zone defense. I do believe in playing multiple defenses, because Carolina never knew how to react to it. They never, for whatever reason, what they saw today, they were not prepared for. And Hubert Davis never called a timeout. But more importantly, while we made our push back to get into the game, because we got down by 5, when we get back into the game and take the lead, all of a sudden with 5.5 minutes to go in a 1 to 2 possession ball game, we start running the clock. We start walking the ball up the court. We start standing around until there's 8-10 seconds on the clock, and then we want to get into a set. And now we're settling for a bad shot, committing a bad turnover, doing all these things that we didn't do to get back in the game. And I just really thought today, when he said there was one or two different things, it was a bunch of different things that really cost Carolina. I thought his end-of-game management was as big a reason why his team fell short this afternoon.
Oh, yeah, there's no question about it. It was terrible. That was the first thing I said to you when we were standing there outside the Smith Center getting ready to ride back to the Southern Village. Said right out, I don't understand why you take the air out of the ball in a game that you were finally grabbing control of. And you decided, no, we're not going to try to keep being aggressive and try to firmly take control of this game. We're going to slow things down, and we're just going to basically hold on and pray that we can find a way to win this game. And they played not to lose. They didn't play to win. And that's what's frustrating, because this is a team that has more talent. This is a team that should expect to win this game every time that they step on the floor. And, for the most part, I think you were in position to be able to get that done. Even though you were trailing at 1 point by 5 to this team, you had positioned yourself well. And you're a team that should be able to out-execute this team down the stretch of the game. But I thought that was terrible. I thought, dude, out of timeouts, off of inbounds. Just horrendous defensively. Just an awful job done defensively, where Stanford scores 5 baskets off of inbounds. Very, very simple plays that Carolina is simply not in position to be able to make. And yeah, part of that is execution. Part of that's coaching. And that's a tough look for Hubert Davis. But I think, yeah, honestly, it's threefold in this game. The coaching was rough. The execution was incredibly poor on the defensive end of the floor. I mean, way, way too many times today, guys sagging way off of guys, leaving dudes with wide open shots. Like, I actually thought people will probably take the most issue with the way that the team guarded Reynaud. I thought for the most part, they guarded him pretty well. It was everybody else that they seem to forget about on the floor. And it leaves guys like Sellers, who we knew coming into the game could score the basketball, and Jalen Blakes. It allows them to have success. And so I thought that area of the game was poor. And then I thought the officiating was terrible at the end of the game. Carolina should have had the ball back with the lead on what was a very clear travel, double dribble, whatever you want to call it. Carolina doesn't get that call for some reason, despite being in their home gym. And that ends up coming back to help Stanford because they end up drawing a foul there, taking the lead. Then Carolina comes back and eventually retakes the lead, but it would have been a much different finish. So I think 3 things really came down to the reason why Carolina ends up losing this game. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Officiating should not be the reason that you end up losing a game to Stanford. So the most important things that you're going to look at are the coaching and lack of execution.
Yeah, I believe so much more in college athletics, football, basketball, whatever. It's okay to expect your coach to help you out more at that level than it is at the pro level. Today was a day where Carolina did not – yes, did we play our best? No, we did not. But that's where you need your coach to get the most out of you. That's what Kyle Smith did. I mean, he helped coach his team to a win. While his best player did record a double-double, was 8 of 24 from the field and 3 of 12 from 3. Like, I think if you would have told us that was the shooting percentages going in, Carolina wins the game. But, credit Jalen Blakes, who, the former Duke transfer. This game probably meant a whole lot more to him, was 7 of 13 from the field, had 7 assists. I think he scored or assisted on 8 of their 13 baskets in the second half. And then Isaiah Sellers, it just felt like every time he took a shot, it was a big shot at that sequence of time in the game, and the ball was able to find the bottom of the net. So, I got some more thoughts on Hubert that we'll get to here in just a minute, but I've been very defensive of him. And I think for the most part, man, I could justify defending him. Today was not one of those days, man. Like, today was one where, by year 4, you'd like to feel a lot more comfortable and confident that you're not going to get out coached. But that's what happened, I thought, down the stretch today, and I thought it was as big a reason why Stanford was able to win the ball game. The stat of the game I thought was very unique and difficult to figure out, to find. I went points off turnovers, simply just because Carolina was -3 in that category while being +3 in turnovers forced. That's a hard pill to swallow. I think the 2 biggest issues were Carolina I didn't think they looked to run off of turnovers today. I don't think they looked to get the ball up the court, to get the ball past the midcourt stripe into the opponent's scoring zone as quickly as they could have. And then literally every turnover that Carolina committed today was damning. It was the exact turnover that led to points going the other way. You had the one when they went back to the zone with 2 minutes and 20 seconds to go, where R.J. Davis was trying to pass the ball back over to the wing to Elliot Cadeau. That ball gets deflected. They run down the other way for a layup. You also had one on an inbound in the second half too, where Carolina literally didn't do anything. They literally just grabbed the ball. We're nearing a 5-second violation. We have to throw it up, and what does Stanford do? They get it, they run down the other way, and they put the ball in the basket. Like, dude, those are mistakes that cannot happen. Not in conference play. Not when your margin of error is this thin, this small. And that's just the reality of the situation. 9 times out of 10, Carolina is able to overcome those mistakes. This team can't. We talked about going in that for this team to play to their fullest potential, they've got to play as hard as possible and as smart as possible for as close to 40 minutes. They did a really good job for 38 minutes today taking care of the ball. But at 2 critical possessions in the second half, I don't want to say they went brain dead. I think that's a little harsh, but I mean, they just quit. They just quit thinking, and they committed 2 critical errors that this team can't overcome right now. And that better be pointed out, and that better be reminded in that film session, hopefully tonight. I mean, this was an early ball game. This game was over at 4:15, 4:30. My hope and my prayer is that they did what they had to do post-game media-wise. They took showers, and then they got back in the film room, and they tried
They better be practicing. They better be practicing tonight because the effort wasn't there the whole game. So, to me, I would have them out there. You don't want to play during the game? You don't want to give 100% during the game? Well, that's fine. We're going to go out there, and we'll be out here all night. We'll see who really cares that much. So, because this is unacceptable.
That's the stat of the game, and now we'll just get into more thoughts, more takeaways. The thing is that there really isn't. I mean, I got a couple takeaways from the game because this game was just so on both sides. There's not a whole lot that stands out. I think it's really just the last 5 minutes that need to be dissected and discussed, and we've done that already, and I think we'll do that here moving forward. You could tell for whatever reason, and I don't know what it is with Raynaud, this game I think felt personal to him because he was jawing. We kind of sat in our seats after the final horn and let the arena kind of clear out. When he got done doing his TV hit, he was running on the court. He was yelling and screaming, took his jersey off, whatnot, and then they directed him somewhere else to go. After the final horn, but
you're leaving out the part where he almost completely destroyed his coach because he tried to jump on him. And at 7-1, I don't think that he realizes how big he really is.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? But 25 points, 13 rebounds today, was 6 of 6 from the field. But as I mentioned, he wasn't efficient. He was 8 of 24. He is 3 of 12 from the 3-point line. With that being said, Carolina just isn't equipped to handle a guy like him. Not for 37, 38 minutes. And I think that should be used as reinforcements for this team when they go into the transfer portal this year, when they look to rebuild the roster after the end of the 2024-2025 season. I thought Ven-Allen Lubin played well. You can maybe argue, considering the opponent, what he was up against. His best game as a Tar Heel, 13 points. 5 rebounds in 24 minutes. Jalen Washington wasn't bad. He had 8 points, 4 rebounds in 16 minutes. It just wasn't enough. And Raynaud was by far and away the best player on the court this afternoon. And I think we've learned with this team, if the opponent has the best player and that best player is a big, it spells disaster.
Yeah, well, it can. I think that what you've got to figure out a way to do is you've got to take away everybody else. Like when you've got a guy that's that talented, there's really not much you can do. Because like I said, I thought for the most part, they defended pretty well against him. I thought Lubin did a really good job throughout the day. And I thought even when Jalen Washington was on the floor, for the most part, they weren't out of position. They weren't getting bullied. There were a couple of times where he drove by some guys, but I think he's just a hell of a player. I think at some points that you just have to tip your cap to him and say, this dude's just making plays. But I thought when Carolina in the second half forced him to be an outside player, that's what changed the game. That's what gave Carolina a chance to shut them down. But you let Jalen Blakes in that second half go off. He was involved in everything that they did. And I'm sorry, man, Jalen Blakes, there's a reason he isn't playing at Duke. He is not a great player. You should not have been allowing him to take over the game. And you did. And that's a bad look for Carolina. It really is. Because you had defended your asses off in the previous 3 games. And yet, for some reason in this game, you couldn't stop a reject from the school 7 miles down the road. And, I mean, Sellers, as you mentioned, big shot after big shot. Every time they needed a shot to stay in the game, they'd hit it. Anytime that you sagged too far off of a guy and they were able to find him, they knocked down shots. And that's what kills you. Because we saw this was the same recipe as the game against UCLA. You had a big man who was having an extremely successful day against you. Billadu was tremendous in that game. But Carolina, what was the difference in the second half? They took away everybody else. And that was why Carolina was able to win. In this game, they weren't able to take away Blake's in the first half, but you thought, okay, they'll be able to adjust in the second half. They didn't. He hits the biggest shot of the game, and that's ultimately the difference for Carolina. So moving forward, you're going to face bigs that are really just that good, and there's just nothing that you can do about it. But the thing is going to be, can you find a way to take away the other options on these teams? Because when other guys are scoring around a guy that's having a big day like that, that's a tough recipe to be able to succeed.
Yeah, and I think, the biggest thing, I think it starts with intensity and that want to and that desire. And I thought that's what this team was missing today. There wasn't an intensity from this group. They didn't defend with a purpose. I never felt like they took Stanford out of what they wanted to do. And again, small adjustment that we saw from Hubert Davis, which I liked in the first half. We haven't full court press during the win streak. You haven't had to because your half-court defense has been elite. Been the best defensive team in the conference, for God's sakes. But today, the adjustment was, okay, well, we'll pick up after made free throws or out of timeout, dead ball situations. Okay, that's fine because you're doing something, you're tweaking, you're giving them a different look. And I thought for the most part it was effective. And then you quite literally don't do it in the second half until the final possession of the game. And then in the final possession of the game, which, by the way, you called timeout to draw up the defense, what'd you call timeout for? Because, and we can argue if it's about execution or not. That was the same defense we saw that was called timeout for and set up for in the Notre Dame game. For whatever reason, and in that game, Carolina picked up full court, but they allowed Marcus Burton to get all the way to the rim. This game, you pick up full court. Seth Trimble does back off, but by the time he re-engages with Blake defensively, he's at the 3-court stripe. And I know some people were saying that he pushed off because he was able to get so much separation. I mean, from my vantage point in the arena, I didn't feel that way. I just felt like Trimble was just too far off of him. And this is a guy that when he's playing defense at a high level, that guy's in your hip pocket. I mean, he can tell you what you ate for breakfast because he can smell it in your breath. And that just was not the case this afternoon. And so, I know Greg Ward said right here, you shouldn't have to coach effort on defense 19 games into the season. Geez, he doesn't take responsibility. But look, man, this is still a young team that's still trying to find its groove. And in this day and age, you got to coach effort. It's frustrating as crap. There's nothing more maddening than having to coach effort. It's quite literally why I will never coach, because I don't have the patience to coach effort. Like, this is where I get frustrated with him, is the feel for the game. And if I never once felt like he did anything to try to wake his team up. Like, dude, call a timeout. Try to do something on the sidelines. Try to send a message by putting someone in the game that could maybe wake these players up. And that player is not Kay Tyson. Hopefully, what happened to Kay Tyson when Ray Nod dunked on him is the last we see of that kid this year. But there was just never anything to try to change the energy, change the vibe when his team came out flat. And that happens, guys. It's sports. But in college, I think it's the coach's job to try to do something to change that, and he didn't do that. And another thing I think that he struggled with today, and maybe I'm wrong here, I thought he played Ian Jackson too much. And I know how gifted of a scorer Ian Jackson is. I know how he can put the ball in the basket. But when he's not putting the ball in the basket, he might be a liability on the floor.
Especially when you're struggling defensively. That's to me what the difference is. If you were defending well, whatever.
And I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, I thought RJ, good feel for the game today. When he had to move into the lead man, when Elliott could have picked up his second fouls he does now in every first half, I thought he ran the offense well. I thought Elliott Cadeau in the second half was brilliant. I thought he was fantastic. I thought, he knew when to attack. I feel like he knew when he could get to the hole and either finish or draw a foul. Thought Seth Trimble could have been more aggressive, but what I think was really killing them was the fact that you had Ian Jackson on the floor not giving you points, and that's where you should have had Drake Powell, because even if Drake Powell does not score, Carolina defends at a much higher rate.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Put him in late in the game. We're not saying that we shouldn't have seen Ian Jackson in the middle of the game. We're not saying, hey, man, 12 minutes left to go in the second half. Why in the world was Ian Jackson on the floor? It doesn't make sense why Ian Jackson was on the floor in the final 2 minutes of the game when he was not really giving you much offensively. It just wasn't his day. So, okay, let's play defense for offense. Let's put our best defender, one of our best defenders out there, and hopefully he can find a way to slow down the guys that are scoring. Now, the problem is you were not using Drake Powell as your primary defender against Jalen Blakes. That's a guard. He's their point guard. That's a guy that, I mean, look, could Powell probably stay with them? I think there's a chance that he could, but there's a reason why Seth Trimble was on him. Seth Trimble is looked at as your best perimeter defender. And it was just, a rough moment for him. But yeah, I agree with you on that. And that's a thing where you've got to have a feel for the game, the way that it's going. And I get it. It's tough, man, because you don't want to bench a guy like Ian Jackson, or it's not even benching, but you don't want to have Drake Powell taking minutes away from him and Ian Jackson thinking in his mind, okay, is this going to happen if I have off games? Because then that can start to mess with you mentally. But in a game like this where you needed to find a way to win down the stretch, I would have liked to see it. For the most part, I agree with you on RJ, but I will say that I thought late in the game really struggled. I thought he took where he turned the ball over. The turnover was unbelievable. I mean, the team went zone. I could not believe that a fifth-year senior turns that ball over like that. It just can't happen. And then I thought his shot selection on the shot, that happens before Stanford eventually comes down and ties the game, just a terrible shot. I mean, just a terrible shot with time still left on the clock. Did not like that one at all. Where the rest of the day, I felt like his shot selection was actually pretty good. But this is what happens when you try to take the air out of the basketball and you're trying to play conservative. You're playing not to lose. And it's felt like that. That's one thing that we have always gotten on Hubert about is I don't understand that mindset. I get it if it's a minute 15 left to go in the game. But even then, you're still waiting way too long to get into your offense. To me, it just does not make sense with 5 minutes to go for you to say, yeah, let's slow the tempo of the game down and let's really just clinch our butts and hope that we hold on to this one. It doesn't make sense.
Well,
how do you win like that?
The more frustrating thing I thought was that he took us out of the game as fans.
Yep.
Because I thought the crowd today was fine. I thought the crowd today was good. A lot of people there. I think the fact that it was a very boring is not the right word. It was a very ugly game to watch. There wasn't a lot to get excited about, but when Carolina came back from down 5 and they got back in the game and they were able to take the lead, we were right there. I mean, everyone on their hands and feet, cheering, yelling, screaming, doing whatever. And then you quit doing all that. And then there's nothing worse than watching someone stand in the middle of the court, dribble the ball for 20 seconds and try to run offense. Why do you think no one watched Virginia during Tony Bennett's glory years? I would argue that was the lowest rated team that's ever won a national championship because no one wanted to watch that crap. No one wanted to watch that today. And especially this team feeds off of energy and emotion. And when they are in attack mode, like when he feels like he cuts them loose and lets them just play free and be hungry and play like dogs and all that metaphorical crap, I think this team really feeds off of that.
That's how they got back into the game.
And I think there was a message that was sent almost subliminally when he does it. He does it. Because you see it's not the four corners offense because you can't run that anymore, but he gives them the sign, and then all of a sudden, we just stop. I mean, it's just like boom, and we're literally gonna quit playing basketball. Mm-hmm. He told his team without telling his team, "I don't trust you to win the game." And the problem is, and this is where I get really frustrated, is he's not a good enough coach in the X's and the O's to control the game with his play calling. There are some coaches that are great play callers. Kyle Smith, the guy that outcoached him today, is one of them that whenever he's trying to control the game from the bench, he knows how to control the game. Hubert isn't there yet. And that's okay. He's a fourth-year head coach. But when it's coming at the expense of winning, it's resulting in you losing, then you gotta take a step back. You gotta quit being the control freak, and you gotta let your players play. You talk so much about when they won at Notre Dame, they gotta figure it out. Well, they figured it out. They figured it out at NC State. Why'd you not let them figure it out today? Like I just like that to me is where I don't like. That's what I didn't understand is I was getting to the point where I felt pretty comfortable. 4 minutes to go, we're gonna find a way. And then today we take a major step back because with 5.5 minutes to go in a 2-possession ball game, we quit playing basketball. We quit doing the things that got us back into the game, that got us back in control of the game. And frustrating, and it's really indefensible at this point. And I don't know if that's something where Jeff Lebo, Brad Frederick, someone on that staff needs to challenge him. But there's got to be some self-reflection. And that's where I say, man, Hubert's got to own this one as much as anybody because the players may not have executed, but what he was wanting them to do wasn't great. I mean, look at the play where Trimble got fouled to get the lead. That only happened because Trimble said, F it, I'm going to drive the ball to the lane because we did nothing. We did not create a look. We did not. It was like 7 seconds to go on the shot clock, and he had to make something happen.
Oh yeah, it was honestly it was so ugly. That sequence really described the game, I thought. This is what this team looks like down the stretch of games. They're so reliant on guys making shots. And you talked about, Tony Bennett at Virginia. Yeah, when you got guys that can make shots, that can create on their own and just find ways to knock down tough shots, you can succeed. Tony Bennett showed you that when they won a national title. But since they won that title, what did that team look like when they held the ball as long as they did? And that's what Carolina does late in games. And it's you bring up a great point. It basically is his way of telling them, I don't trust you guys to win this game. So I think that we have to pull this gimmicky BS to just try to get out of here with a victory against Stanford. So if you don't trust them to do that, when are you going to trust this team? I mean, they came in on a 3-game winning streak. You still didn't trust them? It does not make any sense. It does not make any sense at all why he still looks at this team and says, we can't trust this group. because I'm going to tell you right now, if you can't trust them at this point of the season, then you're just not trusting that they're going to find a way to win the games they need to. And if they don't, then you don't have a tournament squad. It's that simple. And I mean, I hope that he's not there. In terms of somebody on the staff letting him know, I mean, who's going to say something to him? Like, first of all, the only guy that's got coaching experience is Jeff Lebo. And there's probably concern that if you say something, you could potentially be in line to lose your job. So, I mean, I'd love for Lebo to tell him, look, man, you got to trust these guys down the stretch. You know, I've been a head coach. I've been there before. I get where you're just trying to get out of here with a win. But you've got to, I mean, again, I don't have an issue with you doing that at a certain point in the game. But when you had the momentum and you were finding a way to create separation once again, I mean, you went from down 5 to up 5, and you were in control of the game. At that point, yeah, let's keep doing what we're doing and find a way to pull away. You make that a 7, 9, God forbid you get to double digits. That game's over. Stanford doesn't have enough to claw their way back into it. But you said it when we were leaving the arena. They did not put this team away. They had so many chances to do it, and they could not find a way to put them away. And that's what we've seen now for 3 straight weekends. They had a chance to put Notre Dame away. They didn't. Let them back into the game. Had to win on a miracle. They let State back into the game. Had to scratch and claw, win on a block shot. This game comes down to the end again because you had to scratch and claw, and this time it doesn't go your way. And now you have a loss because it's at home that's going to more than likely be a quad 3 loss.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the road wins being dramatic, if you take away the records of those teams and just look at, it's still hard to go on the road and win, especially for a group that's got the deficiencies that this group has. And also, like, those 2 road games, those were the biggest games at home today for those 2 opponents in Notre Dame and NC State. So I can be a little bit more forgiving for not putting those teams away. Today, though, like, you go up 24-17. What happens? Kyle Smith timeout. Guess what happens? They score 5 straight points. Now we're okay. Not that the game would have been over, but like, that's a situation where that game was on the verge of Carolina taking advantage of the game and running and going away with it. You were up 66-61, 5.5 minutes to go. You get a stop and a bucket. It's now a 3-possession game. Still plenty of time left, but mentally, for a team that had just saw a 5-point lead slip away, how do they recover? How do they respond? They never made them press. They never made them feel like, oh, if we don't make a play here, the game's going to be over. And that's what Carolina's been able to do during this winning streak, is to force teams to make mistakes and kind of compound on them and then go on some sort of a run. There was never that run today from Carolina. There was never a game-changing run. It was a 15-round heavyweight fight with both teams throwing soft punches until the final round. And in the final round, it was Stanford that dealt the blow that was ultimately enough to get the job done. And that's a hard pill to swallow when that happens on your home court. Let's get to our discussion topic. And before we do get out of this edition on the podcast, we thank everybody that's with us live here on a Saturday night. I know it's an NFL playoff night, but we appreciate all y'all that are sitting here with us talking through Carolina's defeat. I'm not going to say that I agree with this, but I think it's worth talking about. Is now Carolina's 12-7. They're now 5-2 in the league. The game on Tuesday at Wake Forest is still going to mean a lot, and it's going to be very important for both teams. A lot of Carolina fans and, of course, their haters were trying to discredit what this team did during the 4-game winning streak. Say it wasn't impressive. This team did not really achieve anything. They're beating bad teams. Now they just lost at home to a okay-ish team, if you will. So did today's loss undo all the progress that we thought this team had made entering today's ball game?
I don't know. I don't know if I would say that. I don't think it undoes everything, but it undoes a lot of it. It's going to be hard to recover from it. And it sucks because I'm with you. I don't really think that Stanford is that bad of a team. I said that earlier in the week when we were talking about it on Wes and Walker's show before they played Wake Forest. I thought this team had shown signs. I mean, the way that they just destroyed Virginia, I thought showed you that this is a team that is probably better than people believe that they are. What sucks is that now, I mean, you lose this game at home, and yeah, it falls into that quad 3 category. And from a metric standpoint, yeah, this pretty much takes away everything that you did. They look at this as a really bad loss for Carolina, and now you're firmly on the bubble. It'll be interesting to see whether or not Carolina is still on the right side of the bubble after this, because you've got one win in quad 1, and that's against a UCLA team that, right now looks like they're in the midst of potentially falling apart under a coach that is just a complete psychopath. So I mean, that's what sucks for Carolina right now, is the one win that you're trying to stand on is not even really that strong. That's why now the games coming up, quad 2 opportunity against Wake Forest, got to have it. Quad 1 opportunity on the road at Pittsburgh, absolutely got to have it. That team is not good. They have shown you that. Pittsburgh again at home, another quad 1 opportunity as of right now, got to have it. So I think those are the important games that Carolina looks at and circles down and says, hey, we got to have it. This created less of a margin for error. And, it stinks because it felt like this team had been settling into a rhythm. And my hope now is that this team doesn't look at what happened today and say to themselves the same thing that we're saying, which is, man, this team felt like they were rolling, but this is a tough loss. How do you recover? In their minds, it needs to just be a blip on the radar and say, look, we look at how well we defended during that stretch. There's no reason that we can't do that moving forward. I just right now, I don't know if this team has that mindset going into the game against Wake Forest, a crucial one now on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I think what you hope is that what Hubert Davis said in the post game, which is that it wasn't one thing, it was a bunch of little things, gets corrected. And I think today serves as the best reminder and the best example. Guys, for us to be our absolute best, we've got to play at such a high level for as close to 40 minutes as possible and be locked in from the scouting report just to in-game execution, whatever it is. And I think that's possible. I think they're capable of doing that because they won 4 straight games and they were locking down teams and becoming the defensive team that they've been. They were last year, that fueled them to winning an ACC regular season title and being a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. So you would hope not. You would hope that this doesn't undo all the progress that you made and all the confidence that you built up. Because I think it's another thing is that Carolina, had gotten confident with who they were and what they could be, despite knowing that they don't have size to compete night in, night out with some of the bigger teams this conference has to offer, let alone the sport has to offer. We're going to find out on Tuesday night where this team is at from a mental standpoint. Was this just a minor setback, or was this maybe a prelude of things to come that this team is going to struggle in these types of game situations all year long? And you hope that's not the case because I don't know how many of these games they're equipped to win, but that's the reality of the situation. That's where they find themselves now at 12-7 and 5-2 in the league. So never would have thought.
Credit, by the way, Brian Taylor. I did not see this. He says Lenardi has us as last 4 buys after today's game. Brian, thanks so much for that. And that's not shocking. Honestly, that's not shocking. That's where they fall after a loss in quad 3.
Well, I mean, and look, dude, they're 32nd in KenPom and top 40 in net. They're a tournament team. Their metrics would suggest it. Because we're Carolina, we expect to win a lot of the games we lost to, and we lost in the non-conference schedule. I don't know realistically how many teams, without a legitimate starting five for the first 2 months, mind you, win the games that Carolina lost. I really don't. So I'm not saying that they're
Michigan State is a much better loss than it was at the time. Like, I think people need to realize that. That looked at the time like, that's, fringe tournament team. That is certainly looking a lot better now than it did at the time.
Yeah, look, Carolina is a tournament team. We're going to talk about them as a tournament team until they are not. They passed the eye test. I've watched a lot of college basketball. They're one of the 68 best teams the sport has to offer. Now, I'm not saying they're a top 4 seed, but are they one of the 68 teams that deserves to play for a national championship as of today? Yes. Yes, they are. So they'll be talked about as such. And until they're not, then that's when we'll start maybe talking about them legitimately as a bubble team. And a game that could determine that will be the game on Tuesday night when they travel to Winston-Salem to take on the Demon Deacons, a game that we'll be back previewing live tomorrow night. In the meantime, guys, this is going to shut down this edition of the podcast. We encourage you to visit the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com. Go and check out the recap of today's game. I posted it once we got back from Chapel Hill, so you can read about the loss if you so choose. I'll be back on Tuesday, getting you ready for that 9 p.m. tip with the Wake Forest Demon Deacons as I continue to take you through the college basketball season. As for the football side of things, a big day for Bill Belichick and his staff. A guy that may not be committed to coaching the Tar Heels landed 2 commitments today, and his biggest commitment so far of the transfer portal cycle. Of course, Anthony has you covered on that front as well. We encourage you guys to visit that website. That's HeelToughBlog.com every morning, afternoon, and evening for the latest and the best Carolina basketball, Tar Heel football coverage. Now, as for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners Podcast and we'll pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the basketball season. And you heard me right. We will be back live tomorrow night after that Bills-Ravens game goes final in the AFC divisional round of the playoffs. We're going to go on here and we're going to preview that Wake Forest game. It's a big game for both schools. It feels like one of the bigger Carolina Wake Forest games of my lifetime. It'll have an old Big Four feel to it. Of course, Monday being a holiday, we figured might as well go live on Sunday night, give you guys a great preview for the game. Of course, that will be back later in the week to recap. So make sure you're ready to go tomorrow night around 9:30, 9:45. We'll be back here live on the Heel Tough Blog Facebook page, the Heel Tough Blog YouTube channel, and, of course, my personal Twitter page at HTB_Josh. With that, guys, this is going to wrap up, though, this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. I want to thank all of you for watching and listening. And, as always, go Tar Heels.